This video is about how to create a gradebook in Moodle using weighted categories or percentages. The first thing we want to do is go into grades and then create our categories that we'll be using. So the first thing we'll do is go to grade report and change this to full view. And then from here, the first step is we're going to change simple weighted to just weighted mean of grades. And then we're going to begin to add our categories. And today we'll add 3 categories. The first one is test. Change that to weighted mean of grades. And then down here, I'm going to just use the same as above, test, and then the ID number will be test again. This information here I can pretty much just leave as the defaults, and then I'm going to hit save. The main thing is when I go into here, I need to determine the weight of my test. I'm going to say 40% is what the weight of these tests will be. I'm going to add a second category, and this time I'll add quizzes. So again, change it to weighted, and then come down here. And this is what I'll do for each of my categories. So for quizzes, I'm going to say that my quizzes are worth 20%. Then I'm going to add a third category and call this one homework. Once again, change the weighted. I'll change that to 40. So I have 3 categories, test, quizzes, and homework. The weighting here is 40, 20, 40. So that equals up to the 100%. I'm going to save these changes. And then I'm going to come over here to this calculator under course total. And I'm going to click on this. And here I have to put in a formula. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say equals the sum of, I'm going to say test, I'm going to say times 0.4, and then I'll do this with here, and I'll say quizzes times 0.2, and then the last one, homework times 0.4. Now, what that tells Moodle to do is to add up the average of my test and multiply them times 0.4, and then do the same for quizzes and homework, and then it will add all those together and give me my grade. Okay, so now the basic part of my gradebook is set up. The next thing I need to do is to look at entering in the assignments and quizzes that are going to be graded. So I'm going to go back to the main page, and I'm going to add an activity. I'm just going to add a quiz. Now it's important here, I'm going to say quiz 1. The important parts here are down here. Under grading, I want to make sure that I choose the correct category. So this will be quizzes. And then at the bottom, it's very important here that I put in an ID number. So I'm just going to say Q1 for quiz 1. And then I'll just save and return to course. I'm going to add another activity. This time I'll just add an assignment. can call this homework 1. And then once again, I'll come down here, I'll find my grade. Grade category is going to be homework, and my ID number will be HW1. Then I'll add another one. This time we'll add a test. We'll call this test 1, come down here, categorized for test, go down to the very bottom, and then we'll just call this T1. So now when I go back to the gradebook, you'll see here, test 1, quiz 1, homework 1. My students will be listed here, and then each of these categories will just continue to push over as I have test 1, test 2, test 3, and then so on. Now what I want to do is go back in here to this full view again. And it's going to be important because now I have to set up the calculations for each of these categories. So when I go into test, here's my IDs now. So I'm just going to say equals the average of T1. And then I would basically continue on here, T1, T2, T3, and however many tests I had across the board. And I would do that same thing for quizzes. So this is going to be equals the average of, and I'm going to say Q1. Make sure that you begin after you do the equals average, you do a parentheses and then close the parentheses. And then finally with homework, do the same thing. So that sets up my grade book for each one. Now every time I add an assignment, a graded assignment, I'll have to go back in and then add that to it. So I'm going to go over here and look at a different course. And in this course, you see the grade book is set up. I've got a student in, I've got some grades in, so you can see the calculation. So here I've got a student in, so you can see these two quizzes average out to be a 40. I've got just some homework assignments in. I've got this homework here, so that's the homework average and then the test, and that equals up to be a 61 total. When I look at the full view, you can see quiz, these two quizzes, they're weighted the same. The category is 20, down here 4. So when we look here at the homework, you can see average of homework 1, homework 2. Economic Systems essay is an ID number 48, and then homework 4. So this averages out, and then we'll calculate that score. So when I go down here to the bottom and hit course total, and see sum of quiz times 0.02, homework 0.04, test 0.04. I just did the 0 point instead of the 0.4 as I did in the other course. The calculations still work. The important part here when you're setting up the gradebook is you make sure that you set up the categories and the category calculations first, and then as you add the assignments in, you add those calculations to your category totals. And that's how you set the gradebook up in Moodle.